The state of quality on Roblox is bad. Not just a bit of low quality, but the entire platform is falling apart. In fact, I never planned on making this video, but due to the low quality of Roblox games, I've had nothing else to make content on for a very long time. As many of you have probably noticed, going through the Discover page on Roblox never really results in finding a game worth playing, and often ends up showing the same low quality games that have already existed for a long time, and you might be wondering why that is. Let's start with the obvious reason, and that is one that everyone's probably noticed, and that's the low quality games that somehow end up with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of players at a time. Games that you might be familiar with. Some of these games are Blox Roots, Blade Ball, Adopt Me, Brookhaven, and one of the latest brain rot skibbity toilet games, Toilet Tower Defense, a tower defense game where you defend against toilets using units. And these games, like the tower defense games, are just copy and pasted over and over, super low quality, and they just bring in more and more players somehow. And this drags away players from higher quality projects with less players, and it pulls them into their games instead. Also, with the example given of Blox Roots, before I get hate for that, I just want to mention that I do actually play Blox Roots. It's actually quite a nice game with a very large map to explore and a lot of things to do. But it is a bit confusing of why it has millions of players, and the quality doesn't nearly blow me away. There's some games with some really impressive graphics and looks to them, and for a game with millions of players bringing in absolutely tons of money, they could easily build a really, really high quality game with some high quality updates and not just add a random fruit every so often. And it's a bit confusing of why it has millions of players when there's other games that could easily rival it in terms of stuff to do, but they have nowhere near the success that Blox Roots has. Starting off with one of the obvious reasons for the success of these types of games is that they cater their game more towards a children demographic. And as such, a lot of the older players don't actually get to enjoy these games because, like it or not, whether you're old, young, a majority of Roblox's player base will be children and those iPad toddlers that are just sitting on their tablets and iPads all day long, playing brain-dead games like this skibbity toilet defense, and that is why developers are probably going to cater their game towards children. So when a game has an audience made up of children, it's always going to tower over other projects and to be pushed more by Roblox because it has more players. And this can be seen if you just scroll across any of the sections on the Discover page of Roblox. Now, as much as this factors a lot of the success of these bigger games, which is indirectly killing the high quality smaller games, sadly there's not that much that anyone can do about this unless you plan on taking out a lot of toddlers worldwide. And this has always been the case on Roblox, especially with games like Adopt Me that have always been thriving on the platform due to their younger audience that play the game. But a factor that actually can be affected is how much Roblox is pushing each of these games for their own benefit. It's probably of no surprise to any of you that Roblox wants money. And if you've ever noticed, games like Blox Roots, Blade Ball and Adopt Me have some pretty extortionate prices on some of their in-game purchases, and this further encourages Roblox to keep pushing these games to the top of their categories, which puts the game in a constant cycle of gaining more players and depriving smaller games of the same opportunities to do well. Even when a high quality game has microtransactions, usually a lower quality, awful copy of that game, better suited to take out as much money out of the player's wallet as possible, will be rolled out after, because the original game would just be overtaken and forgotten about, while the new game just keeps making money for Roblox and gets pushed more and towers over the original game. Another perfect example of a super popular low quality game that only does well due to kids playing and replaying the game over and over is The Strongest Battlegrounds. This game is a relatively new game in comparison to the other big Roblox games, and it is literally a base plate for a map with 4 moves that you can use in an FFA that infinitely respawns you and never ends due to the large amount of younger players just probably keep respawning and playing the game over and over without realizing how much of their time they're actually wasting on this low quality trash of a game. Now, these are all the main reasons that the quality of Roblox games are affected by really trash popular games that dominate the platform, but now I want to talk about a major factor of games being awful recently, and that's the new games being released by developers currently on the platform. If you've taken a look at the up and coming page on Roblox, you've probably noticed the lack of unique or fun concepts that are actually going to stick around for a long time, and you might be wondering why no one will develop and make the new big fun next game. Well, basically, the main reason of this is there's basically no payoff for developers to create a new, creative and innovative game. Why would developers spend a load of money, a load of time, possibly even years, creating a game to maybe get 1,000 players or so, then to die off when they can just make an awful, low-quality game riding on a trend, or make a copy of another popular game to siphon as much money through the stupid game passes and microtransactions that people will waste their money on, which will probably die at the same rate, except make the developers a lot more money in a lot less time with a lot less effort. And when a game copies an already super successful concept, they remove the risk of failure, If a developer spends, let's say, 2 years on a project with multiple other people and spends a lot of money hiring developers and designers and music composers, all sorts of stuff, to make a super good and creative game, and it fails, then they lose everything. But if instead they copy a game that's, let's say, it's got 100k players, for example, this toilet tower defense game, and they copy that, and a copy like this has reached up to like 15 to 20k players, and it is the same game, which is a copy of an already awful game, and there's also another copy, and another copy called Bathtub Toilet Defense, or not even Bathtub Toilet Defense, just Bathtub Defense, which probably took the devs no longer than a week to create, as they're just copying an already existing low quality game and are making an even lower quality clone to hitchhike off the success of the original, which will make more money than actual good games. So all we see constantly are awful copies and simple and already bad games just flooding the whole platform with awful games. Even putting aside the last two factors, another thing that greatly impacts the success of games is something that I learned from another YouTuber who went over a similar topic called Monobear. I highly suggest you check out his video on it too, and that's their replayability. This is a factor that affects games inside and outside of Roblox and sometimes leads to their success or failure. And a game being able to be replayed over and over is something that is usually seen as like a really good thing, because it makes a game really good. But when it comes to games at the top of Roblox, it's just what keeps the game thriving over competitors. When you take a look at one of the biggest games right now on the platform, which I keep going over the same example just because of how awful it is, Toilet Tower Defense, the game is basically an infinite loop of hopping back into the same game to do the same thing over and over. And let's say if after all your hundreds of wasted hours grinding the same meaningless updates, you actually manage to get every strong or rare unit in the game, they will just roll out another low quality copy paste update with another unit that's 10 times harder to get, to keep these kids playing their game 24/7, wasting their lives, striving for a meaningless goal over and over. This type of loop of meaningless gameplay is especially effective with their target audience of children, as the toddlers do not have lives to waste. A big problem a lot of Steam games actually face when it comes to replayability is that their players pay money for their games and end up having a small amount of time on the game played, which means it wasn't worth the purchase. And this reflects similarly on Roblox games, especially higher quality games that rely on the initial cost of the game and not stupid microtransactions poorly placed in every part of the game. And Roblox devs can only do so much with a game in terms of updates, so when a game is unique or more story based, the games will just fall apart because people aren't just willing to pay for a game they don't even know if they will like originally and won't have much time to spend on it. Now, these are two huge factors that are causing a flood of low quality games on Roblox, but another factor that affects a lot of high quality games is the community built up around them. When it comes to games, there are a bunch of features that are only able to be utilized by games with strong and active communities. For example, trading. If a game has 50 to 100 players and it adds a trading system, it's not going to be interacted with as much, and it's probably going to be left alone, as there's less players on the game. And if you take a game like Toilet Tower Defense, again I keep using this example, I'm sorry, but it just covers every bad thing that I want to go over in this video, and everything that it utilizes well to gain these players, it just does it perfectly. It's a great example for everything. And this game has a trading system and 200,000 players at times. In fact, I've seen it go to like 400,000, I'm pretty sure, if my eyes aren't deceiving me. And one game is clearly going to be more enjoyable if you're talking about trading, because if you go into their Discord server, you can easily just see thousands of people trying to interact and trade. And the trading system in a smaller game is just not going to work the same just because of the lack of players. So no matter how high quality that is, there's just certain things that the game can never do if they don't have the initial players behind it. And this isn't the only example of things that small games can't do. Things like PvP and the ability to beat games multiplayer enable people to have a lot more fun while playing the games, especially with tower defense games. I know a lot of me and my friends used to hop in tower defense games and play them together, and even though they were pretty boring just grinding through, if you did it with a couple of friends, it was actually quite an enjoyable experience, and you could just chill with your friends, and it's quite fun to do. But a smaller game or a story game might not be able to utilize these factors as well, just because of their low community. So if a game adds all these features and it takes them, let's say, a month to add all these really cool updates, they might just not be interacted with because they just can't be utilized well without players, which means their updates and time has just gone for nothing. And these are all the factors I'll be going over in this video, but it's clear to see how and why there's been no hit games like the original Jailbreak or Pokemon Brick Bronze coming out, and how the platform is slowly being flooded with copies and simulators and losing what made Roblox a great platform to begin with, its uniqueness. But sadly, there's nothing we can do about it unless people stop playing these awful games, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon.